Get out of my core, witch. The metal tray crashed into Mara Kestrel's shoulder so hard, the entire mess hall flinched. Water exploded across the table. A fork skittered across the floor. And for a split second, a thin, dangerous second, the quiet Navy petty officer everyone ignored became the center of the storm. Lance Corporal Troy Harker smirked as if he'd just proven something. He had no idea what he'd awakened. The humid air inside Camp Ravenwood's main dining facility vibrated with the sudden silence. Hundreds of Marines froze mid-bite. Boots halted. Conversations died. Under the fluorescent tubes buzzing overhead, Mara steadied herself with one hand on the table's edge. She didn't look weak. She looked calculating. And only 3 people in that entire room recognized the look. Mara Kestrel, Petty Officer First Class, Navy Cryptologic Technician, Administrative Liaison, wasn't administrative anything. She lifted her head slowly. Her brown eyes, normally calm and unreadable, contracted into that razor-thin operator focus most people never notice until it's already too late. Her right hand twitched toward her left forearm, the scarred line where a breach Mech 7 charge had gone off during Operation Iron Gale. A reflex, a ghost of Farah Province, a memory she'd spent years burying. But she forced the hand down, forced the breath to slow, forced the old instinct, the instinct to end a threat before it escalated, to stay buried. Harker mistook that stillness for fear. He laughed, loud, performed for the room. Look at her, Navy support can't even hold a tray. None of his friends joined in. Even they felt something was wrong. Mara's tray lay upside down on the linoleum, green beans and rice smeared across the floor like a battlefield map. She stayed motionless for 3 beats, long enough for Staff Sergeant Dean Rourke to narrow his eyes from across the room. Rourke had seen this before in Iraq, the absolute stillness of a person deciding whether to unleash the violence they were trained for, or swallow it. She chose swallowing it. Mara straightened her uniform, brushed water off her sleeve, and met Harker's eyes. No anger, no fear, just a cold, clinical assessment, as if she were mapping angles, exits, choke points, as if she were back in a compound in Farah, counting targets through night vision. Harker's smirk faltered. Mara walked past him without a word, boots silent across the tile. But as she reached the exit, she paused, just enough that only Rourke saw her fingers curl into a fist and release again. A tiny tremor, not from pain, from restraint. When the doors swung shut behind her, the room exhaled. Noise returned in nervous fragments, murmured questions, whispers of, "What the hell was that?" And she didn't even flinch. Rourke didn't whisper. He muttered it aloud, mostly to himself, "That woman's not support." Harker rolled his shoulders like a boxer after an easy round. She walked away. Doesn't get clearer than that. Rourke's gaze stayed locked on the door Mara had disappeared through. Or she decided not to drop you in front of the whole damn battalion. The words hit harder than the tray had. A ripple passed through the Marines nearby. They suddenly weren't so sure who had won that exchange. Harker stiffened. She's Navy. On a Marine base. She should know her place. Rourke looked at him for a long, silent moment. The kind that weighs more than a lecture. "You don't know anything about her, Lance Corporal." And at that precise moment, a notification pinged across the hall PA system. "All personnel. Mandatory company formation announced for 0700 tomorrow. Ordered by Captain Calder." Harker frowned. Rourke's expression hardened. And somewhere outside, Mara Kestrel stopped walking, because she knew that formation wasn't routine, and it wasn't for the Marines. It was for her. Tell us where you're watching from. Subscribe to Stories Unseen. Part 2 reveals the life Mara Kestrel tried to bury. Mara Kestrel didn't sleep that night. Camp Ravenwood settled into its usual darkness. The generator hum, a distant metal clang, the quiet shuffle of night-duty Marines. But inside her barracks room, silence felt like an old enemy pressing a hand against her ribs. Tomorrow's formation wasn't about discipline. She knew the difference. This was something else. Something that smelled like the past trying to claw its way back into the light. She sat on the edge of her rack, rubbing the pale straight line along her left forearm, the mark left by a miswired breech make 7 charge in Farah province. People called scars lessons. This one wasn't a lesson. It was a memory that refused to fade. By her 9th year in the Navy, 3 in conventional SIGINT and 6 embedded under the Spectre program, Mara had carried more real-world operations than most operators accumulated in a career. But none of that appeared in her current file. The real pages didn't exist in any room without a cipher lock. Her father used to tell her scars were the truth the world tried to bury. And Mara had become an expert at burial. Master Sergeant Elias Kestrel, Green Beret, Panama, Mogadishu, had raised her on survival more than childhood. He taught her silence, patience, and the kind of awareness that made doors, people, and rooms readable at a glance. Not paranoia, preparation. It was that awareness that kept her alive when Operation Iron Gale unraveled. She'd been 3 years into her Navy career, just another cryptologic technician. When analysts noticed, she spotted signal patterns the software couldn't. JRSU sent 2 officers to evaluate her. They didn't give details, only an offer. Work that matters, work no one will know you did. She said yes. And Spectre 13 was born. SEAL Team 4 didn't welcome outsiders easily, but Lieutenant Ethan Reese had taken one look at her. Calm, clipped efficiency, and said, "If she's Spectre, she's with me." He taught her the rhythm of the stack, the unspoken language of CQB, and the particular quiet of operators who'd seen death up close and learned to stop flinching. Iron Gale was supposed to be quick. Insert, extract a courier, exfil under darkness. It became 96 hours trapped inside a half-collapsed compound in Farah, surrounded by militia gun trucks cutting off every exit. No drone support, no comm relay. Improvised triage. Ammo counted like heartbeats. And the breach accident, her accident, nearly took a teammate out entirely. But they survived. All 6 of them. Because Reese refused to break, and she refused to waste the faith he'd placed in her. 6 months later, Reese died in Haditha from an EFP blast. One of those brutal clean ends special operators sometimes meet. No funeral, no public acknowledgement. Just a message passed through channels built to carry ghosts. Mara carried a fragment of his broken dog tag from that day forward. Not as guilt, just a weight. An anchor to the person she'd been in Farah. She requested transfer out the same week. Not because she was done with the job, but because the job wasn't done with her, and she feared who she would become if she stayed. The sanitized reassignment to Ravenwood was supposed to be a quiet landing, a place to disappear in plain sight, a break from doors that blew inward and nights measured in gunfire. Then Troy Harker shoved her in a mess hall and reminded her of a truth she couldn't escape. You can run from the shadows you came from, but you never outrun what they turned you into. Command. And tomorrow, someone else clearly knew that too. Captain Adrian Calder didn't raise his voice when the company assembled on the parade deck. He didn't have to. Prior recon Marines carried pressure the way others carried rank. It radiated off them in quiet waves. He stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back. "There have been lapses in discipline," he said, eyes sweeping the formation, "and lapses in judgment. We don't ignore that in this battalion. We test it. A beat. Effective immediately. We're initiating a Crucible command trial." The whisper of tension moved through the formation like wind through pine needles. Even Rourke's jaw clicked once, a sign he hadn't expected this. Calder's gaze locked onto Lance Corporal Troy Harker. "You've had a lot to say about standards, Harker. Step forward." Harker obeyed, spine rigid. 7 more Marines were called, volunteers and victims of pride. Then Calder turned his head toward the last person in formation. "Petty Officer First Class Mara Kestrel," he said, tone level. Your sanitized training history lists prior instruction support, and Naval Intelligence has quietly confirmed your qualifications. I'm specifically requesting you serve as both participant and evaluator. The air shifted. Not loudly, just a collective recognition that something wasn't what it seemed. Harker's confidence faltered. Mara stepped forward, expression unchanged. Calder nodded. 10 participants, 3 days, 0 exemptions. They stepped off into the Black Pine Training Reserve, a punishing sprawl of swamp, pine scrub, sudden dips, and open sand patches that turned even seasoned Marines into cautionary tales. Harker surged ahead, chest expanded, breathing loud enough to announce dominance. He kept glancing back, waiting for Mara to chase him. She didn't. Mara moved with a long, efficient rhythm born from years of crossing hostile terrain. Controlled steps, steady breath, nothing wasted. She didn't fight the distance. She dissolved into it. By mile 7, one Marine dropped from cramping. By mile 10, another was pulled due to overheating. Harker's form deteriorated, stride shortening, shoulders collapsing inward. Mara maintained the exact same pace, unbroken, unbothered. At the finish line, she looked like she could have kept going. Harker looked like he'd barely survived. Calder observed silently, expression unreadable. Range 41B punished arrogance with efficiency. Concrete rooms, steel catwalks, blind angles, fatal funnels waiting to teach lessons the hard way. Harker, still burning from yesterday, tried to seize control. "Dynamic entry," he barked. "Hard and fast, Hollywood style." Evaluators didn't respond. They waited. Mara studied the terrain for 2 minutes before speaking. "Recommendation to adjust the plan," she said calmly. Calder nodded. "Proceed." Mara knelt and drew the layout in dirt. Cross corners slicing, overlapping fields of fire, slow step entries, progressive sector coverage. No bravado, just precision. Harker scoffed. "This isn't how Marines do it." Rourke cut him off. "Execute her plan, that's an order." They moved. The team completed the scenario without a single simulated casualty. Even the evaluators exchanged subtle looks, recognition mixed with unease. Harker's confidence cracked further. Mara hadn't humiliated him. She simply operated on a level he couldn't reach. A mandatory 6-hour recovery period separated days 2 and 3, barely enough to hydrate and reset, but realistic for sustained operations. Then the drill began. Blank fire thundered through the woods. Smoke grenades hissed. Simulated casualties lay scattered across terrain that turned chaotic fast. Leadership, rotation, line integrity, fatigue management. By hour 18, Harker was unraveling, missing sectors, forgetting rotation timing, losing situational awareness. Mara didn't falter. Not when the pyrotechnics echoed the blast from Iron Gale. Not when the terrain forced memory and instinct to collide. She breathed, steadied, operated. By dawn, only 4 participants remained upright. Harker among them, barely upright. Mara among them, steady as if she'd trained for this her whole life. Calder stepped forward. "Debrief," he said quietly. 1 hour. He paused, eyes locking onto Mara. "And Kestrel, someone is coming to see you." Her stomach tightened, not in fear. In recognition. There was only one kind of someone who crossed service lines unannounced. Briefing room B12 wasn't meant for comfort. Cold air. A steel table bolted to the floor. Cinder block walls painted the color of old paper. A place designed for conversations that weren't supposed to happen, where people learned truths they couldn't repeat. The 4 remaining participants filed into the front row. Their uniforms were streaked with dirt and sweat, eyes still hollow from the 26-hour drill. Harker's hands trembled slightly, a mix of exhaustion and something new, uncertainty. Mara sat at the far left seat. Calm on the outside, steady breaths on the inside. but her pulse tapped her ribs with a familiar warning. Something is about to surface. Captain Calder stood near the projector. Rourke and Gunnery Sergeant Longley flanked him, silent, unreadable. They weren't guarding the room. They were guarding what was coming next. The door opened. A Navy officer entered with a step that cut straight through the tension. Commander Helena Ward, service dress whites immaculate, silver hair pulled tight, face carved from resolve. Her ribbon rack was a quiet warning, half the colors unfamiliar, the kind used for operations that didn't officially exist. Calder straightened instinctively. Even Rourke's expression shifted. Ward scanned the Marines with cold, precise attention. "Thank you, Captain," she said. "I'll take it from here." She tapped a control. The projector hummed to life. A single sanitized image appeared, grainy, partially redacted. A collapsed stone compound, desert night sky, a defensive perimeter lit by green NVG halos. Ward spoke. "This is a declassified fragment from Operation Iron Gale, conducted in Farah Province. A 6-person joint element endured 96 hours inside this collapsed structure under continuous encirclement." Harker blinked. 96 hours? Ward continued, voice steady and controlled. "Details of participating units remain classified, but I am authorized to share one fact for training purposes. One intelligence specialist maintained perimeter planning, improvised medical coordination, and counter-assault sequencing after a breach Mech 7 accident injured a teammate." Her finger moved toward the blurred figure in the center of the projection. Small frame, NVGs glowing. "That specialist," Ward said quietly, "was Petty Officer First Class Mara Kestrel." The room went silent enough to hear fabric shift as someone exhaled. Ward didn't embellish, didn't list numbers, didn't mention Spectre 13. She only allowed one more sanitized line. She provided direct field intelligence support to special operations units across multiple deployments, and her evaluations consistently described her as indispensable under extreme conditions. Harker's face drained. He looked like a man realizing the ground beneath him wasn't ground at all. Ward focused on him. "Lance Corporal, understand this clearly. If Petty Officer Kestrel had chosen to respond to your provocation in the mess hall, the outcome would have been immediate and non-negotiable. For you." Harker swallowed hard. Ward turned back to Mara. "You requested conventional duty after a teammate was killed in Haditha. That choice was honored, but your performance during the Crucible shows your skills remain precise, disciplined, and teachable." Ward faced Calder. "Captain, my office is formally recommending Petty Officer Kestrel for assignment as an instructor with the Marine Marshal Combat Center at Quantico. Marine Training Command has already signaled preliminary approval." Calder nodded once, proud but measured. Rourke's jaw tightened with respect. Ward stepped closer to Mara, lowering her voice, not soft, but intentional. "You were never defined by what happened in Farah, and you are not defined by what you walked away from. Your next battlefield is one where lives can be saved before they ever reach a firefight." Mara felt something shift inside her. Not pride, not fear. Recognition. Ward straightened. 2 weeks. That's how long it will take your transfer paperwork to clear." Then Ward delivered the line that cut deeper than anything else. "You're done hiding, Petty Officer. It's time to decide who you're going to become." And for the first time since Iron Gale, Mara Kestrel didn't feel like a shadow. She felt seen. The door of briefing room B12 shut behind Commander Ward, and for the first time in a long time, Mara Kestrel didn't know how to breathe. Not because she was afraid, because the truth she'd buried for years had finally stepped into the same room as the life she'd tried to build. Rourke approached first, quiet, respectful. "You didn't have to hold back," he said softly. Mara shook her head. "Yes, I did. Because restraint wasn't weakness. It was the last promise she ever made. To herself, to Reese, to the ghosts who never made it home." Calder stopped beside her. "Quantico's a good place. You'll change lives there." She didn't answer at first. She just glanced at the faded projection still lingering on the wall. The ruins of Farah, the collapsed stone, the green NVG halos. Iron Gale had taken something from her. Maybe this was how she took something back. Calder extended a folder. "Paperwork will take 2 weeks," he said. "When it clears, you go. 2 weeks. Time enough to process gear, sign transfers, detach from Ravenwood. Time enough to decide whether she was stepping into a role, or finally stepping out of a shadow." 2 weeks later, Mara stood at the edge of Camp Ravenwood with a single duffel and a worn fragment of Ethan Reese's dog tag sitting in her palm. Not guilt, not sorrow. Just memory and obligation. She closed her fist around it and walked toward the waiting transport. No dramatic music, no slow-motion farewell. Operators never left that way. They simply moved on to the next fight that needed them. The drive toward Quantico was quiet. Not long. But somewhere between the Carolina Pines and the Virginia highways, Mara realized something. She wasn't moving away from her past. She was moving toward the people who needed the part of her she had tried hardest to bury. The Marine Marshal Combat Center smelled of sweat, gun oil, and discipline, the language she understood better than her own reflection. Master Gunnery Sergeant Coyle met her at the entrance, gaze steady. "We don't get people like you often," he said. "We're not here to glorify you. We're here because young Marines need to learn what you survived." Mara nodded. "Then let's teach them." Her first class filed into the bay. 23 young Marines, loud at first, then silent when they saw her stance. Mara didn't introduce herself with rank or history. She simply said, "I'm going to teach you how to stay alive when everything else fails. That's the only metric that matters." The room straightened. They felt it. The gravity of someone who had stood in the worst kind of darkness and hadn't let it consume her. She stepped onto the mat. "Pair up," she said. "We begin." As they moved, Mara touched the fragment of Reese's dog tag inside her sleeve. A quiet ritual, not of mourning, but of continuity. For the first time since Farah, she understood her place. She wasn't a ghost haunting a battlefield she left behind. She was the force preparing others for the ones ahead. And in the quiet between commands, she understood the truth Ward had hinted at. A real ghost doesn't disappear. A real ghost becomes the reason someone else gets to live. Life doesn't always give second chances, but it always gives you a choice. Who you'll be after everything tried to break you.